Welcome to Celestial Zodiac. In this video we're breaking down one of the most important foundations in astrology, the astrological houses. If you've ever looked at a birth chart and wondered what all those sections actually mean, or why two people with the same zodiac sign can live very different lives, this video will help make sense of it. We'll start with what astrological houses are, why they exist, and how they're used in a natal chart. Then we'll move through all 12 houses so you understand how this system works as a whole. When people first start learning astrology, they usually hear about zodiac signs and planets first. But the astrological houses are just as important because they show where life actually happens. Astrological houses represent areas of life, not personality traits. They don't describe who you are. They describe where experiences unfold. Things like identity, relationships, money, work, home, health, and purpose all live inside specific houses in the birth chart. A simple way to think about it is this. Signs describe how energy behaves, while houses describe where that energy plays out. For example, a planet in Aries will express itself in a bold, initiating, and direct way. But whether that energy shows up in your relationships, your career, or your inner world depends entirely on the house that planet is in. The house gives the life context. This is one of the most important distinctions in astrology. Signs are about style. Houses are about location. Many beginners mix these two up, so it's important to be clear. Zodiac signs describe personality traits, motivations, and tendencies. Houses describe life departments, which are the different arenas of human experience where those traits show up. Astrological houses are created by dividing the sky into 12 sections at the exact moment you were born. As the Earth rotates, the sky above you is constantly shifting, and your birth chart captures a snapshot of that movement in time. That's why birth time matters, because it determines how the sky was divided into houses. Every birth chart contains all 12 houses, even if some of them are empty. Empty does not mean inactive. Empty means it simply means that life experiences in those areas are expressed differently, often through transits or planetary rulers, which we'll talk about later. So why do houses exist in astrology at all? Because astrology isn't just about personality, it's about living life. Humans don't experience energy in a vacuum. We experience it through work, relationships, family, money, creativity, crisis, growth, and reflection. The houses exist to map those lived experiences. If planets are the actors and signs are the roles they play, then houses are the stage where the story unfolds. Understanding the houses gives astrology practical meaning. They show how cosmic energy turns into real-world experience, where things happen, not just what they feel like. And once you understand the houses, the birth chart stops being abstract and starts becoming a map of life itself. Now that we understand what houses are, the next question is how they actually appear in your birth chart and how to read them. So how do they actually function inside a natal chart? The houses appear as the 12 sections of the birth chart wheel. And every person has all 12 houses regardless of how many planets fall into them. The chart itself is a snapshot of the sky at the moment you were born, and the houses divide that sky into distinct areas of experience. Within this wheel, planets express themselves through houses. A planet represents a type of energy or function such as communication, desire, structure, or emotion, and the house tells you where that energy is directed in your life. For example, the same planet can show up very differently depending on the house it occupies. A planet in the career sector of the chart will express itself publicly, while that same planet in the private or emotional sector will express itself inwardly. The planet doesn't change, the context does. This is why houses are so important. They show where life experiences unfold, where challenges arise, and where growth is required over time. Houses describe the arenas of life where we develop, struggle, and evolve. They also help explain why two people with similar zodiac placements can live very different lives. The signs may describe similar traits, but the houses reveal where those traits are being activated. So when you're reading a natal chart, houses help answer the question, where is this energy showing up? Because ultimately, houses don't describe who you are. They describe where life happens. Now that we understand how houses function in the birth chart, the next question is how the chart itself is structured, starting with the rising sign. To understand where astrological houses come from, we need to talk about the rising sign, also called the ascendant. The ascendant is the zodiac sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the exact moment you were born. In astrology, the eastern horizon is the point where the sky meets the earth, and it marks the beginning of the birth chart. This point is important because it starts the first house. The first house always begins at the ascendant, and from there the rest of the chart is built. Once the ascendant is established, the sky is divided into 12 sections, creating the 12 astrological houses. The houses move counterclockwise around the chart wheel, following the apparent motion of the sky. Each house represents a different area of life, but their placement depends entirely on the rising sign and the moment of birth. This is why birth time matters so much in astrology. Even a difference of a few minutes can change the rising sign or shift where the house cusps fall. When that happens, the entire structure of the chart changes. Not the planets themselves, but where their energy is expressed. Two people born on the same day can have the same zodiac signs, but very different life experiences because their houses are arranged differently. The rising sign sets the orientation of the chart and determines how life areas are distributed. In simple terms, the rising sign anchors the chart to a specific moment in time and space. Without it, astrology wouldn't be able to describe where life events take place, only what they feel like. Understanding the ascendant helps explain how the houses are created and why they're so personal. It's the doorway through which the entire birth chart comes into form. Once the rising sign sets the chart in motion, it creates 4 major reference points that structure the entire birth chart, known as the chart axes. These axes divide the birth chart into 4 quadrants and give us a framework for understanding how life energy moves. The first axis is the ascendant and descendant. The ascendant represents the self, how you approach life, how you initiate experience, and how you meet the world. Directly opposite the ascendant is the descendant, which represents others such as relationships, partnerships, and how we interact with people outside ourselves. The second axis is the midheaven, also called the MC and the Imam Sili or IC. The midheaven sits at the top of the chart and represents public life, including career, reputation, visibility, and how we're seen by the world. Opposite the midheaven is the IC, which represents private life, home, emotional foundations, family, and the inner world that supports us. Together, these 4 points divide the chart into 4 quadrants, each representing a different focus of experience. The first quadrant is personal, focused on self-development and individual identity. The second quadrant is interpersonal, where we learn through relationships and interaction with others. The third quadrant is public. This is where we engage with society, career, and collective goals. The fourth quadrant is internal, focused on reflection, integration, and inner life. These quadrants show how we move through life, from understanding ourselves, to relating to others, to participating in the world, and then returning inward to process and reflect. When you look at a birth chart this way, it becomes more than a collection of symbols. It becomes a map of human experience showing how we navigate between self, others, public life, and our inner world. With this framework in place, we can now explore how the 12 houses themselves represent specific areas of life. Now that you understand what houses are and how the chart is structured, we can talk about what most people really want to know. What do the 12 houses actually mean? The simplest way to remember this is houses show where life events unfold. They're like 12 departments of human experience. Every house represents a different area of life. When planets fall into a house, that area becomes more emphasized, more active, more central to your growth, or more noticeable in your life story. Let's go through each of the 12 houses so you have a solid foundation. The first house is the house of self, identity, your presence, and how you meet the world. It's tied to the Ascendant, and it reflects your outward style, first impressions, and your instinctive way of approaching life. Can also relate to appearance and vitality, not just how you look but how you carry yourself. The second house deals with personal resources. Money you earn, possessions you own, and what you value. But it's deeper than finances. It's also your sense of self-worth and what you need to feel stable and secure. It shows how you build stability and what you consider worth investing in. The third house is about communication, learning, thinking patterns, and the way you process information. It relates to writing, speaking, siblings, neighbors, and your everyday environment. This is the house of daily life learning, including the kinds of skills and conversations that shape your routine world. The fourth house represents your home life, family, roots, and emotional foundation. It shows what makes you feel safe, how you were nurtured, and the private side of life that others don't always see. It can reflect your relationship to family, your inner emotional world, and what home means to you. The fifth house is where we create and express ourselves. It's linked to fun, pleasure, romance, play, creative projects, and sometimes children. This is the house of joy, confidence, and the desire to shine. It tells you how you express your personality when you're not just surviving but when you're fully alive. The sixth house is your day-to-day life. Work habits, routines, responsibilities, and health. It rules the way you manage your time, your productivity, your service to others, and how you maintain your body. This is where discipline and improvement happen, which are the small choices that build the bigger life. The seventh house is the house of committed relationships, romantic partnerships, business partners, and one-on-one connections. It also reflects what you seek in others and what you may project onto people. This house teaches balance, including how you relate, negotiate, commit, and navigate intimacy with equals. The eighth house is often misunderstood. It deals with shared resources like joint finances, debts, inheritance, taxes. It also deals with emotional merging, vulnerability, and transformation. It rules deep psychological change, trust, power dynamics, and the kind of growth that happens when you're forced to evolve. The ninth house is about expanding beyond what you already know. It relates to beliefs, philosophy, higher education, travel, spirituality, and meaning. This is the house of exploration, not just physically through travel but mentally through big ideas. It shows how you search for truth and purpose. The 10th house sits at the top of the chart and relates to career, public reputation, achievement, and life direction. It shows how you want to contribute to the world and what you become known for. It's not only your job, but your legacy, leadership, status, and the role you play in society. The 11th house is about community, friendships, groups, networking, and your long-term hopes for the future. It relates to the causes you support and the people you align with. This is where you find your tribe, build connections, and create a vision that goes beyond just your personal life. The 12th house is the most internal house. It rules the subconscious mind, dreams, hidden fears, spiritual life, solitude, and endings. It can represent things we keep private or don't fully understand about ourselves yet. It's connected to healing, release, and the parts of life that happen behind the scenes psychologically and spiritually. So that's the foundation of the 12 houses. 12 areas of life where experiences unfold. Your planets, signs, and aspects tell you what the energies are, but the houses tell you where those energies show up in real life. Once you have the house meanings down, the birth chart starts to make a lot more sense. You're not just reading traits, you're reading the story of where life happens. Now here's what makes this even more interesting. The houses don't work alone. They work in pairs, and each house has an opposite that balances it. One of the most important things to understand about astrological houses is that none of them work alone. Every house has an opposite house, and these opposites form what are called polarities. Houses always work in pairs, and each pair represents two sides of the same life theme. One side focuses inward or personally, while the opposite side focuses outward or relationally. Astrology isn't about choosing one side over the other. It's about learning how to balance both. Let's look at a few examples. The first house represents the self, identity, independence, and personal direction. Directly opposite is the 7th house, which represents relationships, partnership, and cooperation. This polarity teaches us how to balance autonomy with connection. This means knowing who you are while still relating to others. The 2nd house focuses on personal resources, values, and self-worth. Its opposite, the 8th house, deals with shared resources, emotional merging, and transformation. This pair asks us to balance what we own and value individually with what we share and surrender. So you can see that each house has its polar opposite and how they balance each other out. At its core, astrology isn't about extremes. It's about integration. And house polarities help us understand how growth happens through balance. Another way houses work as a system is through their modes of expression, which brings us to house modalities. House modalities describe how energy moves and functions within the chart. Not all houses operate the same way. Some initiate action, some build stability, and some help us learn, adjust, and transition. This is why certain houses feel more visible or intense, while others feel quieter but just as important. There are 3 house modalities: angular, succedent, and cadent. Angular houses are about action and visibility. These houses initiate movement and tend to show up very clearly in a person's life. They're connected to major turning points and outward expression. The angular houses are the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses. When planets are placed here, their energy is often more noticeable both to the person and to others. Succedent houses are about stability and development. These houses take what's been initiated and work to maintain, build, and grow it over time. They focus on resources, security, and continuation. The succedent houses are the 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 11th houses. Energy here is steady rather than flashy. It plays a major role in long-term growth. Cadent houses are about learning, processing, and transition. These houses help us adapt, refine, and prepare for what comes next. They're often linked to thinking, service, belief systems, and inner reflection. The cadent houses are the 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th houses. Energy in these houses may feel subtler, but it's essential for change and understanding. This is why some houses feel louder than others. Angular houses tend to act. Succedent houses sustain. And cadent houses prepare us for change. None of these modalities is better than another, as they each serve a different purpose. Together they show how life moves from action to stabilization to learning and then back into action again. Another layer that adds meaning to the houses is the element they're associated with, which brings us to triplicities. Houses are grouped according to the 4 elements. Each group of houses carries a similar kind of energy. Fire houses are connected to action, inspiration, and vitality. Life experiences in these houses tend to push us toward movement, courage, and self-expression. Fire-based house experiences often involve taking initiative, following passion, and acting on instinct. Earth houses are linked to stability, resources, and practicality. These houses relate to building, maintaining, and sustaining life in a tangible way. Experiences here tend to focus on security, structure, and long-term results. Air houses emphasize thought, communication, and connection. Life experiences in these houses often involve learning, exchanging ideas, social interaction, and mental stimulation. The focus here is understanding, communication, and perspective. Water houses are associated with emotion, intuition, and inner awareness. Experiences in these houses tend to be deeply felt and often relate to emotional bonds, vulnerability, healing, and psychological insight. When you look at the houses through the lens of the elements, you start to see how different areas of life carry different emotional textures. Some experiences call for action, others for grounding, others for understanding, and others for emotional depth. The elements help us understand how life feels in each area. It's not just what happens, but how we experience it internally. Another key piece of understanding how houses work is planetary rulership. Each astrological house has a ruling planet, sometimes called the house ruler. The ruler of a house is determined by the zodiac sign on that house's cusp. That ruling planet acts like a manager for that area of life. It shows how that house functions and where its energy is directed. What makes house rulers so important is that they connect different areas of life together. To understand a house fully, you don't just look at the house itself. You also look at where its ruling planet is placed in the chart. For example, if the ruler of your second house of money is placed in the 7th house of relationships, financial matters may be strongly tied to partnerships or other people. If the ruler of your 10th house of career is located in the 3rd house, your professional life may revolve around communication, teaching, writing, or information sharing. The house ruler acts like a bridge. It shows where the energy of one life area flows into another. This is one of the reasons astrology works as a system rather than a collection of separate meanings. Your chart isn't divided into isolated boxes. It's interconnected. Decisions in one area of life often affect another, and house rulers help reveal those links. At a deeper level, planetary rulership explains why certain themes repeat in your life or why some areas seem naturally connected. The ruler tells the story of how one part of life supports, challenges, or influences another. The key takeaway here is simple but powerful. House rulers link different parts of your life together. In later videos, we'll explore house rulers in more detail and show how they're used in real chart interpretation. For now, understanding that connection is enough to give your chart much more depth. One of the most common questions people have when they first look at their birth chart is what it means if a house is empty, or if one house seems especially full. The first thing to know is this: empty houses are completely normal. In fact, most birth charts have several empty houses. An empty house does not mean that area of life is missing, inactive, or unimportant. An empty house simply means there were no planets placed there at the moment you were born. Life still happens in that area. It's just expressed differently, often through the house's ruling planet and through planetary movement over time. On the other hand, a full house, or a house with multiple planets shows emphasis, not superiority. It means that area of life plays a stronger role in your growth, challenges, or focus. It doesn't mean that area is easier or better. It often means it's more active and more demanding. This is where transits come in. Transits refer to the ongoing movement of the planets in the sky right now as they move through your birth chart over time. As planets transit through different houses, they temporarily activate those areas of life, bringing experiences, lessons, and opportunities. This is why an empty house can suddenly become very important during certain periods of life. When a planet moves through that house, it brings energy, attention, and events to that life area, sometimes in very noticeable ways. In other words, every house gets activated over time, just not all at once. Your birth chart shows your baseline pattern, but astrology is dynamic. Life unfolds in cycles, and different houses take turns coming into focus depending on planetary movement. So whether a house is empty or full, it still plays a role in your life story. Astrology isn't about having a perfect chart. It's about understanding how and when different parts of life come into motion. Another thing that can change how houses appear in a chart is the type of house system being used, which brings us to house systems. One thing that often surprises people when they start exploring astrology is that charts don't always look the same. That's because astrologers can use different house systems. House systems are simply different methods of dividing the birth chart into 12 houses. The sky itself doesn't change, but the way astrologers divide and measure it can vary depending on the system being used. In Western astrology, the most commonly used house system is Placidus. Placidus is a time-based system, which means it takes the Earth's rotation and the amount of time it takes signs to rise and set into account. This is why houses in Placidus charts are often uneven in size. Because of this, the same birth data can produce charts that look slightly different depending on the house system chosen. A planet might appear in one house in Placidus and a neighboring house in another system. That can be confusing for beginners, but it's important to understand that this doesn't mean one chart is wrong and the other is right. Different systems are simply different lenses for viewing the same sky. What matters most in astrology is consistency. When you choose a house system and stick with it, patterns become clearer and interpretation becomes more meaningful. Astrology works through relationships and themes over time rather than perfection or rigid rules. There is no single correct house system. Each has its strengths, and astrologers often choose the system that best aligns with their practice and experience. The key idea to remember is this: different systems, same sky. Interpretation is what matters. Now that you understand how houses work, how they're structured, and how they're interpreted, let's bring everything together. The most important thing to remember is that houses don't function in isolation. They work together as a system. Each house represents a different area of life, but it's the planets that activate those areas. The planets show what kind of energy is present, the signs show how that energy behaves, and the houses show where it plays out in your life. When you start reading a chart this way, astrology becomes much more practical. Instead of memorizing traits, you begin to see patterns such as how different parts of life interact, where challenges arise, and where growth naturally happens over time. The houses also help you understand timing. As planets move through your chart, they activate different houses, bringing focus to different life areas at different stages. This is why life feels cyclical, because attention shifts from one house to another as you grow and evolve. In the next videos in this series, we'll explore each of the 12 houses individually, so you can understand what each one means in depth and how it shows up in real life. These deeper dives will help you apply everything you've learned here directly to your own birth chart. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if these videos help you. Thank you for watching Celestial Zodiac. Until next time, keep exploring the cosmos and how it reflects your life here on Earth.